that Monday night game, it was okay. That game was okay. Los Angeles Rams were off. It was they just couldn't score anything offensively, and the Dolphins defense actually looked pretty good. I gotta give the Dolphins defense credit. They actually stopped the Rams quite a bit, and they were getting after Matt Stafford as well. Like, Matt Stafford could not find a clean pocket most of the time. He was running around for his life quite a bit tonight, actually. I guess the best part about this is watching that moron Colin Cowherd trying to defend his Rams after this loss. Isn't he disgraceful? Let's go through what I got right and wrong. You guys know what the deal is tonight. Every single week, we do it live. We go live to be transparent. There's no editing in this one. You guys get to see the raw emotion of what it's like when I get stuff right and when I get stuff wrong. So like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. And let's get into something I got right this week. So obviously, for the last several weeks, I think for the last month, I have been doing a new video basically going through guys I have the most conviction on every single week. And I call it, these players are going to unleash in this particular week. You know, these are usually fringe starters like flex-worthy guys. Obviously, I'm not going to say Bijan Robinson's a must-start. You know, Jamar Chase is a must-start. It's like, okay, we need to get more specific than that because that's a very obvious thing to point out. But these videos have kind of become a very easy way to go through what I got right and wrong. Now, this week, Juwan Jennings was a guy that I was pretty big on heading into the week. And with Juwan Jennings, you know, ultimately, what I had seen through the weeks with him before Ricky Pearsall was obviously there, you know, when he was recovering from the bullet wound and everything like that still, Juwan Jennings, you know, had the massive explosion game, but kind of fizzled out a little bit over the last month or so in fantasy. Well, the reality is, like, his work was still there, and he obviously had those couple games where he missed those games and he was injured. So he comes back in this week, and I'm thinking, I think this is going to be a good matchup. Like, Tampa's soft defense, they're coming off a bye week, and Debo is still not 100%. I was thinking the whole time, I was like, I think Juwan Jennings is going to be a good play. And he ended up being exactly that. Like, Juwan Jennings in this game, you know, let me pull it up really quick, because I know that Ricky Pearsall had a better game in fantasy because of the touchdown, but Juwan Jennings, I look at this as a W because I think it's more sustainable what Juwan Jennings was able to do in that game. So Juwan Jennings, he had 12.8 fantasy points in a half PPR format, but he had 7 catches for 93 yards and 11 targets. That's the sustainable part. You know, he was very, very important. He was the wide receiver one, the leading target in San Francisco. And this was a game where they were throwing the ball quite a bit. And I think there's going to be a lot more games like this because without Ayuk, it automatically raises the floor of Juwan Jennings. And I think we've all seen this. Like, I think the ceiling is probably fool's gold. Like, that was one of the best scores all year. Like, there's not going to be many better games than that in fantasy this year. But obviously, you know, with Juwan Jennings, I do think that this is actually relatively sustainable moving forward. So I was happy about that one. And then, my goodness gracious, this one was painful to watch. I mean, I was like sort of watching this one because I had personal stock built into this one because I called him a good play this week. Sam Darnold, I called him a must start. I feel bad for each and every person who listened to me on this one and actually played Sam Darnold. He was a disgrace. He was a nightmare. Dude, the guy, my gosh. I have to pull it up because it's so disgusting. Like, I try to block it out of my mind. Sam Darnold ended up with like 10 fantasy points, but this guy threw 3 picks against the Jags and no touchdowns. And 241 yards. Gross. I mean, there's no other way to describe this one other than this guy looked like his Jets self. Like, his Jets version and his Panthers version, they came out against another bad team, the Jags. Like, he's been really good against good opponents this year. You know, like, this is the first really bad, disgusting Darnold game that we've seen this year. And it was just that. It was disgusting. to watch. I mean, this one was an embarrassment. It was a disgrace. And, just the matchup itself was so unbelievably good that I was just thinking to myself, there's no way he's not going to hit, right? Like, there's no way that he's not going to come away with 2 passing touchdowns, 250, 260 yards, a touchdown to JJ and either TJ or Jordan Addison. And, I mean, not only did he not find anyone, he found the other friggin' team. I mean, this was disgusting. Disgusting. Honestly, long season, I don't know what to think of Darnold because, he's been good other than this in fantasy. And not only just for himself, he's been good with Justin Jefferson. So it's hard for me to write him off completely, but this one stings bad because it feels so... I feel so dirty by calling him a must-start. There's 2 quarterbacks that I really screwed up on this year. I screwed up calling Daniel Jones a must-start like a month ago versus the Eagles, and I screwed up with Sam Darnold. And those are historically 2 pretty bad quarterbacks. So, yeah, this one was gross. That one I did not appreciate. Now, here's something that made me feel good during that 1 o'clock window, and I got my mind off of Sam Darnold because the Bills' defense was a treasure this week. Now, with the Bills' defense, some of you in here may be thinking, what's the big deal? The Bills' defense is good. Well, if you've been with me in my channel, all of 2024, I've consistently been higher on the Bills' defense than most people. And there's not many fantasy creators who are doing defense, but ones that do defense, I don't think that many of them were as high on the Bills as I was. Everybody I talked to was way lower on the Bills' defense than I was. This dates back to before the season started. And I just thought people were crazy, Sean McDermott, he's gotten a lot of grief over the years. But that guy knows how to coach a defense. Sean McDermott can't coach a defense. They did lose some personnel. But I was just like, dude, I've seen this guy for years coach this team. He's been good. So this week against the Colts, coming off a bad week where they got, I think 3 or 4 points against the Dolphins, and they were my number 1 defense that particular week. People were giving me grief for it. They were like, why are the Bills? I'm not playing the Bills anymore. Why would you play the Bills? And it's I don't know. They're playing the Colts, and Flacco just tossed 3 interceptions against the Vikings. Maybe that's why. And he did exactly that. He tossed 3 picks again. And then they got a pick 6 out of the deal. Not only did they get 3 interceptions, but they got a defensive touchdown because of the pick 6. So they ended up getting 18 fantasy points. And that was with the Colts putting up 20 points. The Colts, they weren't scoreless in that game. They put up 20 points. The Bills' defense is really good, guys. It's really, really good. So, with the Bills' defense, I'm shocked, honestly, that I was one of the few this offseason who was really big on the Bills' defense. They've got McDermott, man. As long as they've got McDermott, they're going to be fine. They're going to be a fine defensive play. They're going to have streaky week. They're a streaky team. Bills have always been this way. They're going to have really, really explosive weeks, and they're also going to have bad weeks. Sometimes it's harder to see them. Sometimes it's not as hard to see them. I saw this one kind of from a mile away. The Colts, honestly, I'm very curious to see what the Colts do. On a side note, what do they do? Do they stick with Flacco or do they switch back to Richardson? That'll be a discussion I'm looking to kind of follow this week and to see if they decide to make a change. Because Flacco has thrown 6 picks through 2 weeks. I mean, it has not gone as planned for sure. So we'll have to see what ends up happening there. But on the other hand, dude, this one actually makes me freaking mad. This one made me really mad. The Falcons defense, I called them a top 5 defense. And I'll be honest with you guys, I felt bad doing it, but it made too much sense not to do it. The Saints were on a 7-game losing streak. 7. They just fired their head coach in the middle of the season, who isn't good. But that's not the sign of a good team when you fire your head coach, midway through the season. So they had all this garbage going for it, and they were also without like their top wide receivers, like not just Olave, but they had no Rashid Shaheed. Cedric Wilson was out. Like it was Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Mason Tipton, and I was like, there's no way that they do not have a good game this week. Oh my God. I mean, the Falcons, not only did they lose the game against the Saints, who had won a game in the better part of 2 months, they were a disgrace. I mean, their defense right now is the 26th ranked defense in fantasy football this year. And I know why. I know why. I mean, I've been tracking them all year, and it felt gross. Like I said, to do that ranking last week, it felt gross. They ended up with 1 fantasy point, depending on your format, and they didn't manage to get a single bleeping sack against the Saints' offensive line and Derek Carr. I mean, what a disgrace. There's nothing there. Nothing there. Unreal. Honestly, unreal. The Falcons defense, I had the emotional reaction afterwards, and I was like, they're never going to be in my top 12 again. And then I looked at their playoff schedule, and if you guys haven't seen the defensive playoff rankings, I put that out earlier today. I'd go watch it after this live stream. And they're in there because, like, their schedule is too good. You can't ignore the schedule. Their schedule is fantastic in the playoffs. That being said, do you guys understand this? The Falcons are the only team in the NFL, the only defense in the NFL that doesn't have at least 10 sacks. We just wrapped up week 10. They don't have 10 freaking sacks. That's horrible. Less than a sack per game is what they're doing. So yeah, the Falcons defense, this one felt dirty. I hated this one, but of course I get what I deserve because I didn't fully believe in it, and usually if I don't fully believe in something, I'm not going to endorse it. And this one bit me really hard because I put them in it was top 5. I mean, this is not top 10, top 12 we're talking about. I'm okay with missing out on like my 9th ranked defense or my 11th or 12th ranked defense. But when I'm talking top 5, like our top 5 guys need to be pretty solid. This one was horrific. Now here's something that it doesn't make me feel good, to be honest with you, because I like this player. And, heading into 2023, I called him the surprise. And, I did a video about, it was before the start of 2023. I did a video where I was discussing, trying to find the next Josh Jacobs. Because if you remember in 2022, Josh Jacobs was like a mid-round pick, but he ended up being a league-winning player because he was so elite. And then, I look at this situation this year, and it wasn't like last year. Like last year, he had the running back field to himself. There was talk like from Doug Peterson, the head coach, about giving him like 300 opportunities and having him get like 15 to 1,600 yards through scrimmage. Like everything was lined up for him last year. He was the RB3 in fantasy. He was excellent. And I felt good about making that call. And then heading into the season, this is why you can't get married emotionally to the player. Like you can't emotionally attach yourself to the player because Etienne won me a lot of, he won me in a lot of situations last year. But you know what the problem is? Like year to year, that stuff changed, especially with running backs. And Etienne, heading into this year, I was like, I don't see it. Like they're talking about Tank Bigsby like they didn't last year. Like they're saying he's super improved. He looks so much better. Different player this year. And they were talking back in March. Like Doug Peterson was talking about how they wanted to minimize this guy's workload. They didn't want it to be like last year. And I was like, okay, I'm a boarding ship. Like, I don't want Travis Etienne at cost this year. He's like a 3rd to 4th round pick, depending on where you're drafting him at. It didn't make any sense to me. So I see a lot of fantasy creators endorsing Etienne, and it's like, guys, like, we're off the mark with this one. I don't see this one. And he's been bad. I mean, it's obviously you can't like dog the dude for missing time with the injury and anything like that, but the reality being like even when he's been out there, it's been horrible. I mean, what has his ceiling been this year? Honest question. What has Travis Etienne's ceiling been this year? I'm going to look it up right now. First of all, Travis Etienne's an RB 40 on the year. He's averaging 7.4 fantasy points per game. That's a far cry from what he was averaging last year. His ceiling game this year was against Cleveland in week 2. 13.3 fantasy points, half PPR. That's his ceiling, guys. He had 11 carries for 44 yards against the Minnesota Vikings. Like I said, this one doesn't make me feel good. Like I don't sit here and like just revel in the revel in the moment that I could just like really like dunk on a player who's done so bad and I predicted it. Listen, Etienne he's a guy I like. I really liked him last year, and this year I just didn't see it. And, I'm hoping that they just trade him. Like, I mean, obviously the trade deadline's passed, so that's not going to happen. But, I would hope that they would trade the guy because I think they picked up his 5th-year option. He's heading into his 5th year with the Jags next year. I hope they just trade him because I think he's got stuff left into the tank. I just don't think that it's going to work out at all. Like, I don't think he has any redeeming value this year. I think it's over. The only guy I think has redeeming value in that backfield is Tank Bigsby. And that's only if Etienne somehow misses or they just decide to put Etienne on the shelf. Etienne is, it sucks. It sucks. Like I said, I don't like to revel in this one. Like I'm dunking on him, but I avoided Etienne heavily this year. I think I only have 2 shares of him. Out of 90 leagues I'm in, I got him in 2 drafts, and they were both best ball drafts. I avoided him for obvious reasons. And ended this one off. This one hurts. This one really does hurt. Because heading into the season, I drafted this guy so many times. He was my 5th round lock pick from late July to mid-August. For those of you who don't know, I draft as soon as you can start drafting. That's why I love underdogs so much, and I always talk about underdog to you guys. Because if you're a nut like me who just wants to play fantasy all the time and draft, you can draft in best ball leagues all the way. You can start drafting April. And so, obviously, I go through phases when I draft. It's I like this player. Now I like this player a little bit more. Now I don't like this player. Come late July and then through mid-August, I was so big on Dalton Kincaid. He was a back of the 5th round, early 6th round pick. And at the time, there was no Amari Cooper. It was just Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, there's no way Kincaid is less than a top 5 tight end this year. And I think he has tight end 1 upside this year. And so I drafted him so many times. And, it was fantastic because, the stack that I stacked him with Josh Allen a bunch. I stacked him a ton with Josh Allen. And Kincaid, here's the deal. I called him a must start last week. And listen, he went down with injury early in the game. He ended up not returning with the knee injury. So I'm not just talking about this week. That one's unfair. I don't count that against myself. He got injured with a knee injury, did not return. It was I think it was in the second quarter, early second quarter, that he didn't come back. This one is okay, let's just we just got done with week 10. We're heading into week 11. Let's just look back to what Dalton Kincaid has been this year. Realistically. First of all, he's a tight end 14, which if we were talking about the wide receiver 14 or the running back 14, we'd be oh, that's pretty good. Well, it's the tight end. Keep in mind, it's the tight end position. Tight end 14 is not good. He's averaging 6.5 fantasy points per game. Dalton Kincaid this year, in a half PPR format, has had 2 double-digit games. Both of them 11 points. 2 touchdowns this year. And, the irony is, I went through this on the must-start video when I called him must-start. The irony with this one is that Dalton Kincaid is averaging like between like 6 and 7 targets the past like 2 months, and it still hasn't worked. You can blame that on a lot of things, right? You can blame it on Josh Allen if you want to. If that makes you feel better, blame it on Josh Allen. Well, here's the reality. I've watched Kincaid, and like every time I watch him, I come away disappointed. Kincaid has been like, he's dropped balls, number one. He's also just been less explosive than I remember coming out of college and his rookie year. He just looks sluggish and like not strong. Like, and he was never really like much of a tackle breaker. But this guy, like, first hit, he's like catch and drop. Like, he catches the ball, and the first contact he gets, he's going down. It's like, dude, you're like 255 pounds. Show some toughness, man. Like, don't be, God. So this one, like, putting last week aside, because like I said, I'm not gonna fault him for getting injured and leaving the game second quarter, right? Like that's tough luck. But this one's season long, man. And I thought this was gonna be the rebound game. And who knows? Maybe if he stayed healthy and he played the whole game, maybe it would have been. But this guy, all I know is this. He's had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to redeem his fantasy value. And where you drafted him, and particularly me, because I drafted so much of him, and he's just done nothing but squander those opportunities away. It's been embarrassing. It's been disappointing. And that one really sucks. I was really hoping that he was going to be like a top 5 tight end guarantee this year. And he's been anything but that. So that one sucks. That was what I got right and wrong. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to call it early tonight, guys. Got to make the wide receiver rankings and defense ranking video for week 11. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out, and I'll see you all in tomorrow's videos. Peace out, guys.